My beloved child. There is a reason your heart feels unusually restless today. Not because something terrible has happened, but because a conversation unfolded while you were completely unaware, a conversation that quietly shifted the direction of two lives. Last night, beneath a sky filled with silent stars, someone who knew fragments of your story crossed paths with the one whose heart has been unknowingly searching for yours. They spoke your name with unexpected tenderness, and for the first time, your soulmate heard a version of you that shattered every assumption they had been carrying. At first, they laughed softly, convinced there had been some mistake. That can't be true, they whispered, almost smiling at the impossibility of it. They had built an image of you from distance, scattered memories, unanswered questions, and moments that never seemed to fit together. They thought they understood who you were. They believed they had already solved the mystery of your heart. Yet every sentence spoken last night peeled away another layer of misunderstanding until certainty slowly gave way to silence. Imagine the scene. A quiet room. The warm glow of a single lamp stretching long shadows across the walls. Outside, the wind brushed gently through sleeping trees while the world remained unaware that something invisible was changing. Your soulmate leaned forward without realizing it. Their heartbeat slowed. Their eyes no longer wandered. Every word demanded attention because the story they were hearing did not match the person they believed they had known. "What do you mean they never wanted recognition?" they asked. The answer came without hesitation. They were never chasing applause. They were simply trying to protect what mattered. Those words lingered in the room like echoes that refused to disappear. For a long moment, no one spoke again. Something inside your soulmate shifted, not dramatically, but deeply. It was the quiet kind of change that happens when a locked door finally begins to open after years of remaining untouched. Yet the conversation did not stop there. The person across from them revealed another piece of your journey, one that had never reached your soulmate before. They spoke about the days when you carried invisible burdens while pretending everything was fine. They described quiet sacrifices no audience ever applauded, moments when you chose kindness over revenge, patience over bitterness, hope over despair. None of those choices had been glamorous. Most had passed unnoticed. Your soulmate lowered their eyes. Suddenly memories they had dismissed returned with startling clarity. Tiny moments they once ignored now carried completely different meaning. A message you never sent. A goodbye that seemed strangely gentle. A silence they once misunderstood. It all began fitting together like pieces of a forgotten puzzle. Still, one question refused to leave them. If all of this is true, they finally asked, why didn't they ever tell me? No answer came immediately. Instead, the room filled with a thoughtful stillness. Because sometimes the deepest truths are not hidden out of fear. Sometimes they remain hidden because the heart refuses to demand understanding from someone who is not yet ready to see. That realization landed harder than anyone expected. The confidence your soulmate had carried for so long quietly dissolved. In its place appeared something unfamiliar. Humility. Not the kind that embarrasses a person, but the kind that invites them to look beyond themselves. For the first time in a very long while, they wondered whether they had mistaken silence for indifference, distance for rejection, patience for weakness. Outside, dawn had not yet arrived, but something brighter had already begun rising inside them. And then the conversation took an unexpected turn. The person sharing your story smiled gently before saying, "There is something else you still don't know." Your soulmate looked up immediately. What? They almost walked away forever. The words hung in the air. Not because of anger. Not because they stopped caring. But because they believed letting go might finally bring peace to everyone else. Your soulmate's expression changed instantly. Until that moment, they had imagined themselves as the one carrying unanswered questions. They never considered that your heart had quietly wrestled with impossible decisions while asking for nothing in return. Their hands trembled slightly. What happened after that? They asked. The answer came softer than a whisper. They chose compassion, even when no one noticed. Those words pierced deeper than any accusation ever could. Memories flooded back like waves crashing against forgotten shores. Small gestures. Gentle smiles. Unfinished conversations. Moments they had hurried past suddenly became impossible to ignore. They realized they had been looking at your life through a narrow window while an entire landscape had remained hidden beyond the glass. Yet even then, they still had no idea what had happened only hours before that conversation began. Because someone had discovered one final truth. A truth so personal, so unexpected, that the person telling your story almost kept it secret. When your soulmate finally asked what it was, the room fell completely silent. The answer was about to change everything they believed about you. But before a single word could be spoken, there was an unexpected knock at the door. The sound was soft, almost hesitant, yet it interrupted the silence with startling precision. No one in the room moved for several seconds. The person sitting across from your soulmate exchanged a thoughtful glance toward the door, as though they already knew who had arrived and why the timing could not have been more significant. When the door slowly opened, an older traveler stepped inside, carrying nothing more than a weathered notebook tucked beneath one arm. Their face was unfamiliar, but there was a quiet confidence in their eyes that made the room feel smaller. Without rushing, they placed the notebook on the table and said, "I wasn't planning to bring this tonight. But after hearing your conversation, I think it belongs here." Your soulmate looked at the worn cover with puzzled curiosity. It wasn't decorated with elegant designs or precious symbols. It looked ordinary. Almost forgotten. Yet something about it demanded attention. The traveler gently opened it, revealing pages filled with handwritten reflections collected over many years, small observations about people whose kindness often went unnoticed. Then they turned to one particular page. "I met the person you're talking about," the traveler said softly. "Not once, but several times." Your soulmate leaned closer without realizing it. "I never knew their name back then. They never introduced themselves. They simply appeared whenever someone needed encouragement and disappeared before anyone thought to thank them." The room became impossibly still. The traveler recalled one rainy evening when a stranger had been sitting alone outside a small cafe after receiving heartbreaking news. Most people hurried past without slowing down. One person stopped. They offered an umbrella, stayed long enough to listen, and quietly left before dawn without expecting recognition. I didn't understand it then, the traveler admitted. But later I realized, that stranger was the same person we've been discussing tonight. Your soulmate swallowed hard. Another page revealed another memory. A frightened child had once become separated from family during a crowded festival. While panic spread through the streets, one calm voice knelt beside the child, told gentle stories until fear faded, and stayed there until the family arrived. When grateful parents turned around to express thanks, the helper had already disappeared into the crowd. Your soulmate whispered almost to themselves, "Why would someone leave before hearing thank you?" The traveler smiled. Because some people believe kindness becomes smaller the moment it asks to be remembered. Those words settled deeply. Until now, your soulmate had believed love was measured by grand declarations, unforgettable moments, dramatic promises. Yet page after page revealed a completely different language, one spoken through quiet choices that rarely attracted attention. As the notebook continued opening, something unexpected happened. A folded photograph slipped onto the table. No one reached for it immediately. It was old enough that its edges had softened with time. When the traveler finally turned it over, the image showed a group of smiling strangers standing together after helping rebuild a small community garden destroyed by a storm. Faces were joyful, hands covered with dirt, sunlight breaking through clouds. Your soulmate searched every face. There, the traveler whispered. Hidden near the back of the photograph, almost outside the frame, stood someone wearing a simple smile while helping another person lift a heavy wooden beam. No one else in the picture appeared to notice them. They asked not to be included, the traveler explained. The photographer insisted on taking one picture anyway. Something inside your soulmate quietly unraveled. They suddenly recognized a pattern. Every story, every memory, every witness. Different places, different years. The same heart. How many chapters of your life had unfolded beyond their sight? How many moments had shaped you while they were busy believing they already knew your entire story? The questions became heavier than the answers. Then the traveler closed the notebook. "I've told you everything I personally witnessed," they said. "But none of those stories explain what happened last night." Your soulmate immediately looked up. "What do you mean?" The traveler hesitated for the first time. "Because after I finished speaking, someone else entered the conversation." A quiet breath passed through the room. They didn't come to describe what your person had done for strangers. They came to reveal something your person never allowed anyone to see. Your soulmate's heartbeat seemed louder than the silence itself. What was it? The traveler lowered their eyes before answering. They carried one private burden through all those years, and almost no one noticed. The room felt colder. They smiled while grieving. They encouraged others while questioning their own strength. They celebrated other people's victories while quietly wondering whether anyone would ever truly understand them. Your soulmate closed their eyes. Not from guilt alone, but from the painful realization that someone could stand so close, and still remain unseen. When they finally opened their eyes again, only one question remained. Did they ever stop believing? The traveler answered with absolute certainty. No. They became tired. They became quiet. They became careful. But they never stopped hoping that one day, someone would finally recognize the truth without being forced to hear it from someone else. Those words struck with greater force than anything spoken that night. Your soulmate slowly reached toward the notebook. Tucked inside its final page was a sealed envelope. Across the front, written in familiar handwriting, were only 6 simple words. Open only when they're finally ready. Your soulmate's fingers hovered over the seal. And then they recognized the handwriting. For several long seconds, your soulmate could do nothing except stare at the envelope resting beneath trembling fingertips. The handwriting felt impossibly familiar, not because they had seen those exact words before, but because every curve of every letter carried the quiet rhythm of someone who always chose honesty over performance. It was as if the page itself held a heartbeat that had been waiting for this exact moment. The traveler did not rush them. Instead, they stepped toward the nearby window where dawn was beginning to soften the horizon. Pale gold spilled across the room, slowly replacing the darkness that had hidden so much throughout the night. It seemed almost symbolic. The answers were not arriving all at once. They were appearing the way morning always does, patiently, without forcing anyone to open their eyes before they were ready. At last, your soulmate broke the seal. Inside was only a single sheet of paper. No dramatic confession. No desperate plea. No accusations. Just a message written with remarkable calm. If this reaches you, it means life chose a path neither of us expected. I hope whatever you've heard about me helps you see more clearly, but I don't want anyone else's words to become your final answer. Every person deserves to be known through their own voice. If our paths ever cross again, ask me what you still wonder. I promise I will answer honestly. Until then, I release every misunderstanding without bitterness. The room fell silent again. Not the silence of uncertainty. The silence that follows unexpected grace. Your soulmate read those lines once. Then again. Then a third time. Each reading uncovered something different. There was no attempt to prove innocence. No hidden resentment disguised as kindness. Whoever had written those words had already made peace with the possibility that they might never be fully understood. Yet even after accepting that possibility, they had left the door open instead of locking it behind them. Your soulmate lowered the letter slowly. I thought. They whispered, struggling to finish the sentence. I thought they would be angry. The traveler gave a gentle smile. Sometimes the strongest heart isn't the loudest one. It's the one that refuses to let disappointment become its identity. Those words lingered as footsteps echoed outside the building. Not hurried. Not fearful. Purposeful. Someone else had arrived. A young woman entered carrying a small wooden box wrapped in faded blue cloth. She greeted no one immediately. Instead, her eyes settled on the letter already lying open across the table. So, she said softly, you've reached this part. Your soulmate looked at her with surprise. You know about this? She nodded. I was asked to keep something safe until this day. Carefully, She untied the cloth and opened the box. Inside were ordinary objects. A bus ticket worn nearly transparent from age. A pressed wildflower. A tiny smooth stone. A faded bookmark. Nothing appeared valuable. Your soulmate looked confused. What are these? The young woman picked up the stone first. Someone once thanked your person for listening during the hardest day of their life. They gave this stone as a reminder that even mountains begin with something small. She placed it back. Then she lifted the wildflower. This came from a child who believed no one remembered their birthday. Your person spent 10 minutes making that child feel seen. The flower was given in return. Next came the bookmark. A stranger left this inside a library book with a note that simply said, "Thank you for reminding me not to give up learning." Finally, she held up the old bus ticket. This one is different. She hesitated. This was never meant to be a memory. It was supposed to become the beginning of a meeting. Your soulmate's expression changed. What meeting? The young woman looked directly into their eyes. There was a day your lives were meant to cross in a way neither of you would ever forget. She paused before continuing. Everything had aligned. The timing. The place. The courage. But minutes before it happened, someone received news that another person desperately needed help. Your soulmate barely breathed. They never came, they whispered. No. They turned around. They chose someone else's emergency over their own happiness. The room seemed to stand still. A memory your soulmate had carried for years suddenly returned with painful clarity. A day of waiting, of watching every face in a crowd, wondering why no one appeared. Until this moment, they had believed they had simply been forgotten. Now that memory looked completely different. Not abandoned. Interrupted. Every certainty they had held was quietly being rewritten. The traveler spoke again. There is one final witness. Your soulmate looked toward the doorway instinctively. No, the traveler replied. They aren't outside. They're waiting somewhere neither of us can bring them from. Confusion filled the room. The traveler reached into the notebook one last time and unfolded a map. Across its surface, one location had been circled in ink years earlier. No explanation. No date. Only a short handwritten sentence beneath it. When the truth becomes clear, this is where the next chapter begins. Your soulmate recognized the place instantly. It was somewhere they had promised themselves they would never return. And at that exact same moment, miles away, someone else was unfolding an identical map. Far beyond that quiet room, where the first rays of morning stretched across empty streets, another pair of hands carefully unfolded the matching map. The paper had aged, its corners softened by time, yet the circle drawn around a single destination remained bold, as though whoever marked it knew the place would matter long after the ink had dried. The person holding it was neither the traveler nor the young woman. It was someone who had quietly guarded a promise. For years, they had resisted breaking it, even when questions pressed against their heart. They had been entrusted with one simple instruction: do not reveal this until both souls are ready to see the past without trying to rewrite it. That morning, they whispered to themselves, "I think that day has finally come." Back inside the room, your soulmate could not take their eyes off the map. Familiar landmarks stirred memories they had spent years avoiding. There was an old bridge crossing a gentle river. A narrow walking trail lined with tall trees. A weathered bench overlooking water that reflected the evening sky like polished glass. None of those places hurt by themselves. What hurt was remembering the hopes once attached to them. "I promised I would never go back," your soulmate admitted quietly. The traveler nodded with understanding. Sometimes we avoid places because we believe they hold our greatest disappointment. A thoughtful pause followed. But sometimes they are simply waiting to tell us the part of the story we never stayed long enough to hear. Those words settled into your soulmate's heart with surprising weight. The young woman stepped closer and reached into the wooden box once more. Hidden beneath the ordinary keepsakes was a folded piece of parchment no one had noticed before. "It almost stayed hidden forever," she said. Carefully unfolding it, she revealed what looked like a simple sketch. It wasn't a portrait. It wasn't a landscape. It was a timeline. Not dates. Moments. Each one described in only a few handwritten words. First unexpected meeting. First misunderstanding. The silence. The missed opportunity. The season of waiting. The moment hope almost disappeared. Then, near the bottom, one final blank space remained. No words. Only an empty line. Your soulmate stared at it. Why wasn't this finished? The young woman smiled gently. Because whoever drew it believed the ending shouldn't be imagined. It had to be lived. For the first time that night, something brighter than regret entered the room. Not certainty. Not confidence. Possibility. It was fragile, almost impossible to notice, but it was enough to change the atmosphere. Then the traveler asked a question no one expected. When you think about them, what is the very first memory that appears? Your soulmate answered immediately. Their laugh. The response surprised even them. Out of countless conversations, unanswered questions, and difficult moments, the first thing their heart reached for was joy. Not conflict. Not confusion. Joy. The traveler smiled knowingly. The heart has a remarkable way of protecting what matters most. That realization brought unexpected calm. Perhaps the deepest connection had never disappeared. Perhaps it had simply been buried beneath assumptions that neither person knew how to untangle. Outside, the morning had fully arrived. Birdsong drifted through the open window. For the first time, the room no longer felt like a place where old stories ended. It felt like a crossroads. Then a small sound broke the stillness. A phone resting on the table began to vibrate. No one recognized the number displayed on the screen. The traveler looked toward your soulmate. "I believe it's for you." With cautious hands, your soulmate answered. No one spoke immediately. Only quiet breathing could be heard from the other side. Finally, a calm voice said something completely unexpected. "I'm sorry it took this long." The words were simple. Unhurried. Honest. Before your soulmate could ask who was calling, the voice continued. I wasn't calling to explain the past. I was calling because someone asked me to deliver a message if this day ever arrived. Your soulmate stood frozen. What message? The caller hesitated, as though choosing every word with care. They wanted you to know that nothing beautiful between two hearts is ever truly wasted. Even the chapters that seem unfinished become part of the road that leads people back to truth. Tears quietly gathered in your soulmate's eyes. Not from sadness. From recognition. There was something strangely familiar about the warmth behind that voice. Then the caller added one final sentence. They're closer than you think. The line went silent. Not disconnected. Waiting. As your soulmate slowly lowered the phone, the traveler unfolded one last piece of paper tucked inside the map. Unlike everything else they had discovered, this page contained only a single instruction written in steady handwriting. Be at the old bridge, before tomorrow's sunset. No explanation. No signature. No clue about who had written it. Only an invitation that seemed to arrive exactly when every hidden piece of the story had begun falling into place. And somewhere, beyond the river that flowed beneath that forgotten bridge, someone was already making their way there. The hours that followed passed with unusual stillness, as though even time understood that rushing would only blur what needed to be seen clearly. Your soulmate left the quiet house carrying nothing except the map, the letter, and a heart that no longer felt certain of anything it had believed the day before. Every familiar street looked different now. Places that once seemed ordinary carried the weight of forgotten moments waiting to be remembered. As they walked, they noticed something they had overlooked countless times before. People rarely recognize the turning points of their lives while they are living them. A child chasing birds across a park. An elderly couple sharing quiet laughter on a wooden bench. A musician playing a gentle melody beneath the shade of an old tree. Each scene whispered the same truth without speaking a single word. The most life-changing moments often arrive wearing the simplest faces. That realization slowed their steps. For the first time in years, they stopped trying to predict what tomorrow might bring. Instead, they began paying attention to what today was quietly revealing. Meanwhile, miles away, another journey had already begun. Someone stood before a small bookshelf inside a peaceful home, carefully removing an old journal wrapped in soft linen. Dust floated through the afternoon light as the cover opened. Between its pages rested pressed leaves collected through different seasons, tiny reminders that even things which appear lifeless can preserve extraordinary beauty. The journal was filled with reflections never intended for public eyes. Not dramatic declarations. Not impossible promises. Just honest moments written during ordinary days. One page read, I hope they never mistake my silence for absence. Some battles ask us to become quieter before they allow us to become stronger. Another page carried only one sentence. If our story ever continues, I want it to begin with truth instead of assumptions. The writer closed the journal gently. Outside the window, sunlight shimmered across distant water. Without hesitation, they placed the journal into a small leather bag and stepped outside. Back on the winding road, your soulmate found themselves passing an elderly gardener tending vibrant flowers beside a stone pathway. As they walked by, the gardener spoke without looking up. "You seem to be carrying something heavy." Your soulmate smiled politely. "I suppose I am." The gardener carefully removed a fading blossom from one plant before answering. "The hardest burdens aren't always the ones in our hands." Curious, your soulmate stopped. The gardener continued tending the flowers. "Sometimes we spend years carrying an unfinished conversation." Those words reached somewhere deep inside. Not because they solved anything. Because they named something that had remained invisible. An unfinished conversation. Not a broken story. Not a failed ending. Simply words that had never found their proper moment. The gardener finally looked up with kind eyes. "If you are given another chance to speak honestly." A warm breeze carried the scent of fresh earth between them. "Don't spend it explaining yesterday. Spend it discovering who the other person has become." Your soulmate quietly thanked them and continued walking. The advice lingered with every step. As evening slowly approached, clouds drifted across the sky in soft shades of gold and silver. The world felt suspended between endings and beginnings. Then something unexpected happened. A familiar melody floated through the air. It wasn't loud. It wasn't performed on a grand stage. Someone nearby was softly playing an old tune on a violin. Your soulmate stopped instantly. That melody. It belonged to a memory no one else should have known. Years earlier, it had been played during a brief moment shared with someone whose smile had lingered long after the music ended. They followed the sound through quiet streets until they reached a small town square. The musician finished the final note and smiled gently. "I've been hoping someone would recognize that song." Your soulmate approached cautiously. "Who taught it to you?" The musician carefully placed the violin back into its case. "A traveler." "When?" "A few nights ago." The answer sent a quiet wave of astonishment through them. "Did they say anything else?" The musician nodded. "They said if someone stopped to listen carefully." They reached into their pocket and removed a tiny folded piece of paper. "I should give them this." With unsteady hands, your soulmate unfolded it. Inside were only 8 handwritten words. Some promises survive even when two people lose sight of each other. No signature. No explanation. Yet the handwriting matched the note from the sealed envelope. Your soulmate closed their eyes for only a moment. Not to escape. To gather enough courage to keep moving forward. When they opened them again, the sun had begun sinking toward the horizon. Tomorrow's sunset was no longer a distant idea. It was approaching. The bridge was waiting. The map was real. The clues were becoming impossible to ignore. But neither your soulmate nor the mysterious writer knew one astonishing truth that had remained hidden from every witness so far. Long before either of them received the map, someone else had quietly been protecting the path that would lead them back together. And that guardian was finally ready to reveal why everything had unfolded exactly the way it had. Morning gave way to evening with remarkable gentleness, and as the final light stretched across the horizon, your soulmate found themselves standing at the beginning of the old bridge. The river below moved with quiet confidence, reflecting shades of amber and blue as though it had been carrying forgotten stories for generations. Nothing about the place demanded attention. There were no crowds. No dramatic signs. Only the peaceful sound of flowing water, the whisper of leaves in the evening breeze, and a feeling that this ordinary place had been waiting for an extraordinary moment. Your soulmate took one careful step onto the bridge. Then another. Every footfall carried not only the weight of memories, but also the willingness to see those memories differently. Halfway across, they noticed someone standing near the railing, gazing at the river below. There was no need for introductions. Some recognitions happen long before words are spoken. For a moment, neither of them moved. Years of assumptions, unanswered questions, missed opportunities, and silent hopes seemed to gather between them not as walls, but as chapters waiting to be understood. Finally, your soulmate spoke. I almost believed I knew your whole story. A gentle smile appeared. And I almost believed I would never have the chance to tell it. Neither sentence carried blame. Neither searched for someone to win or lose. They simply made room for truth. The evening breeze carried away the tension that had lingered for so long. Your soulmate unfolded the letter once more. I've read these words over and over, they said. But now I'd rather hear them from you. The answer came without hesitation. I never wanted anyone else to define who I was, not even the people who cared about me. I hoped that if we ever spoke again, we could begin with honesty instead of old conclusions. Your soulmate nodded slowly. I see that now. There was another pause, but this one felt completely different. It was comfortable. Peaceful. The kind of silence shared by two people who no longer feared what would happen if they simply listened. Then came the question that had quietly waited from the very beginning. Why didn't you come that day? A soft breath escaped before the answer. Because someone else's emergency arrived first. No excuses followed. No attempt to make the story sound heroic. I thought helping them was the right choice. When I returned, you were gone. After that, I convinced myself life had already chosen another path for us. Your soulmate looked toward the river. I waited longer than you knew. Both of them smiled with a bittersweet understanding. Not because time had been wasted. Because they finally understood how easily two sincere hearts can become separated, not by lack of love, but by incomplete information. Just then, quiet footsteps approached. The traveler, the young woman, the elderly gardener, and even the musician appeared at opposite ends of the bridge. No one interrupted. They had never been there to control the story. They had only protected the truth until both hearts were ready to receive it. The traveler finally spoke. You wondered why so many people carried small pieces of this journey. He looked toward the river before continuing. Because no single person ever sees another soul completely. Each of us witnessed only one chapter. Only by bringing those chapters together could the full picture finally appear. Those words settled gently over everyone present. The young woman smiled. The notebook. The keepsakes. The map. The envelope. They were never tests. They were reminders. Truth is rarely discovered in one dramatic moment. It is revealed one honest step at a time. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared beyond the trees, your soulmate turned back with quiet courage. There is one thing I still need to say. They met your eyes. I'm sorry for believing assumptions more easily than I believed your heart. The answer came with remarkable peace. And I'm grateful we met again before that misunderstanding became our ending. There were no impossible promises about tomorrow. No certainty about every road ahead. Only something far stronger. Mutual understanding. Respect. Hope. Together, they watched the first stars appear above the river. The same stars that had looked down on the mysterious conversation the night before now witnessed something entirely different. Not strangers discovering each other. Two hearts finally allowing truth to replace imagination. Sometimes the greatest miracle is not that life changes overnight. It is that one honest conversation can redeem years of misunderstanding. If this story has spoken to your heart, let it remind you that compassion often lives beneath the surface of people we think we already understand. The kindest choice we can make is to seek truth before reaching conclusions, and to leave room for grace where certainty once stood. May your path be filled with wisdom that sees beyond appearances, courage that speaks with kindness, and peace that gently restores what fear once tried to divide. May every unanswered question in your life become an invitation to grow, and may hope continue to guide you toward brighter days. If this fictional inspirational story encouraged you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who may need a reminder that understanding begins with listening. Until next time, may your heart remain open to truth, your spirit remain filled with hope, and your journey be blessed with light.